downstairs, so I'm going to ask a few questions and then we'll open to audience questions. Mike, can we start with you? Because Cory said at the beginning you're obviously from Roslyn. Can you talk about writing the script and what kind of responsibility you feel also?
Absolutely. So I was about 13 when this all went down. I was in middle school at the time in our school district, and I had at least a sort of passing familiarity with.
Put the mic.
Oh, sorry. I've never spoken into a microphone before. It's wildly exciting. I sort of knew most of the subjects, at least, in some sort of way. And, to be able to go back, 13 years after the fact and then get to kind of like do the research again and speak to, all my former teachers and parents in the community, people that, were sort of more intimately, familiar with everything that happened, was tremendously sort of exciting for me.
And the script was on the blacklist, and another time, the same script, you had two scripts on at the same time, so congratulations. And the blacklist is the list of strongest unproduced screenplays. But at that time, were you and Fred working together and thinking about making the project?
Yeah, so I'd written the script in like the summer of 2016, obviously we always sort of hoped that we'd be able to find the right sort of director to sort of steer the ship. It was this really interesting thing because I think people really liked the script when they first read it, but weren't necessarily sure if it was going to be relevant or speak, or universal in a way that would speak beyond, sort of administrative school board drama in Long Island, New York. And I think that a lot has happened sort of in, certainly the American socio-political landscape in the last 3 years that has made it feel a lot more kind of universal and immediate. But in terms of finding Cory, I hadn't seen Thoroughbreds had not premiered at Sundance at the time that I'd written the script, but it's this crazy sort of kismet where you see a film and you know immediately that that there's a director out there that can sort of execute that exact tonal tightrope that you're trying to achieve on the page in film, and couldn't feel luckier to have been able to work with them.
And Cory, when you got the script, what was it that made you think, this is going to be my second project?
The biggest thing was the tone that Mike mentioned and the way that it navigated comedy and tragedy and often had the two sort of operating at the same moment. It's something that I've always been really attracted to and a kind of challenge that I've always been drawn to as a director. And it was personal to me in a lot of ways, and probably the most immediate was that it was really about education, which is something we don't see a lot of movies about, or a lot of sort of not directly inspiring movies about. And I have a family full of educators. I have a mom who runs a school and is hopefully not embezzling $11 million from it as we speak. And I have a brother who teaches at a public school, and then I did many years SAT tutoring, the big college admissions test in the States, and got a very clear window into kind of the complex relationship between economics and education that I think the movie takes on in an interesting way.
And were you thinking immediately of Hugh when you first read the script?
Not immediately, just because if you look at pictures of Frank Tucson, they're not obvious physical matches. But I think as I sat with it, he became, he felt like someone who'd be perfect for the role, partly because I just was very aware that for the ride of the movie to work in the way that we wanted it to, we needed you to immediately love this guy and just have kind of an implicit trust in him. And it was important to feel that early on when we're seeing him memorizing all the faculty members' names and consoling angry mothers and that kind of thing, that you actually feel that he genuinely, at least a part of him, genuinely cares about these kids, genuinely wants to provide a good education, do the best thing for the school district. And then that let us sort of peel away the layers in a more compelling way, and to have you invested in this guy and not just think he was sort of a snake oil salesman from the beginning.
And Alison is perfect as Pam as well, too. At what stage did she get involved in the project?
Pretty early on. I think she really liked the script. She was excited to work with Hugh. They knew one another kind of socially, but did not work together. which is remarkable, having seen the way that they interact together on set. The first scene we shot with them together was we call it the sandwich scene at the beginning, which the whole ending of that scene is totally improvised, the kind of back and forth of that Mike wrote the presence of the sandwich, but exactly what happened with the sandwich was wonderful improvisation. But yeah, Allison similarly, I feel like has sort of throughout her career navigated that tone of making these characters that are funny, that are broad, but also have a real humanity to them, and you really understand what they're doing, even if it's not always a savory behavior.
We can throw it open to you guys if you want to ask a quick one here in the front.
Hey, I was just wondering how you
I'll repeat the question.
how you approach the character, Hugh Jackman's character. He's sort of like a side figure, so he's really the times that people don't see him.
Sorry.
How
How did he approach the character that Hugh Jackman plays?
Sure, and so specifically his inscrutability. I think that's a good way to put it. I'm always drawn to characters where there's something in them that I can connect to. They're humans, they're three-dimensional, they're not mustache-twirling villains, and they're certainly not heroes. But but where there remains something sort of beyond understanding about what they ultimately do, that feels very real to even the people that I know best. And I think my favorite movies offer some kind of psychological insight, but they pose as many questions about why a character behaves the way they do as they provide answers. And so we tried to do that. We certainly, you want to speak about it in the writing process?
Yeah, I mean, in so many ways. I mean, I was just like a kid when all this happened, and he was like the boogeyman of my childhood. It was ostensibly the biggest thing that had ever happened in my hometown, and people, oh, again, really? He was. Like I said, like the boogeyman of my childhood, and to go back and research and sort of read things he'd written, like for 15 years he'd written a column in the school or in the local newspaper every single week, just talking to parents and addressing their concerns and everything. And I read almost every single one of them, and there's so much to like about this man that I think I was surprised going into it, because I think I thought I was going to approach it with him just being the villain of the story, and very quickly I realized that there's so much about him that I think is worth kind of almost applauding. I mean, he single-handedly kind of shaped my education. He hired every single one of the teachers that shaped who I am today, both as a human and as a writer. It's impossible to kind of separate the two, so there's a weird paradox there.
And did you guys, because there's a lot of empathy for him actually too, because I mean Hugh's a terrific actor, but it feels like it's there in the writing as well. It starts, obviously as you said, it does feel like a genuine care for the students, and I think the way that you might read it is that he was so deluded he just thought he deserved all of those spoils. Is that the way you saw the character?
Yeah, I think all teachers deserve to be paid more money for the work that they do, which I think, goes wholly unrecognized in a lot of ways. And even just going back, like my high school, middle school teachers that taught me how to write when I was a kid were my first readers on the script, because they had all been there at the time. And so it was like they're, writing notes in the margins of my scripts like they used to grade my papers. And going back and sort of, reconnecting with them through this process of writing the scripts, like you realize very quickly how important teachers are, and to me that was definitely one of my first sort of real points of entry in terms of connecting and relating to this man that I'd previously just been conditioned to unilaterally hate.
Question here at the front. Can we queue up another one?
Cory, Mike, thank you for this great film. Kind of makes me wonder what was going on in my school district back in California. I felt like there were just so many layers that were slowly being uncovered throughout the film, which is really cool. And Geraldine Bisphenoff, I think, is a really great actress, so it was cool seeing her in a role like this. And it was also really interesting seeing investigative journalism on a sort of smaller scale, which I don't normally see in a big sort of picture like this. I just wanted to ask how vital and important this story was for you guys to tell, especially in today's time.
Very vital, very important. Yeah, I think it felt, reading when I first read the script, it just really stuck with me, and I think it felt like a way to make a movie that was engaged with sort of the political world that kind of surrounds us in a very distant way, but without making it all kind of a preachy political movie. I thought it was an interesting kind of allegory. I thought it was a cautionary tale about sort of blindly following leaders, particularly when things are going well. And then I thought it had a lot of interesting things to say about sort of the capitalist system that everything, including our public schools in America, are a part of and are sort of intertwined with. But I like that it took all those issues obliquely and it did it in a very human way through a character study. And that was certainly what we were trying to do in putting the movie together.
Sorry.
And then we'll come to the one in front of you. Thanks.
Okay. Hi. This was really interesting to watch because I'm from Yonkers, and for those who haven't been to America, it's very geographically and culturally similar to Long Island.
Yes.
I was in high school at the time, and our superintendent was doing something very similar that he got in trouble with the law for. So watching this, it kind of felt like my parents went to Jesuit school, so when they were watching Gout, they're laughing at dialogue scenes and visibly uncomfortable. And I'm just like, oh, okay, they probably had that conversation. So watching Alice and Janney talk to the reporter, I'm just like, yeah, no, I've been chewed out like that too.
Were you a student reporter?
No, but I was a film critic, and I wasn't allowed to review the good stuff, so I quit.
Interesting.
But actually, my question is, I'm kind of fascinated how it's just occurring to me this is sort of like a period piece in a way, because it's almost 20 years ago, and I was curious how you approach that from a production point of view, because there isn't really a canon to pick from. I think like maybe Spotlight, I guess you could say. And there are like resources, we have stuff on like LiveJournal and MySpace and all those old accounts, but then like, a photo bucket goes down, you lose those archives. So it's kind of like, what do you dig into to make sure like, okay, those are the computer monitors we were using, or we couldn't afford those at the time, the 9/11 posters.
It's a good question. I'm gonna stop you just so we have time for it, but that's a great question.
No, I see what you mean. Early on, I think we all realized like this really is fully a period piece. We don't have to make Edwardian costumes, but this is in all sorts of tiny places you wouldn't expect it. You can't just use what's there. We had to bring in all the computers, we had to bring in cars, we had to bring in, obviously, costumes, and it was really exciting for me to kind of revisit this period of my childhood, and obviously of Mike's childhood as well, and just to see some of these, maps that brought back a strange sense memory of that I hadn't experienced in a long time. But a huge credit to our production designer, Meredith Lippincott, who did extremely extensive research, looking at books of photography from the period, certainly doing some online research, although you're right that some of it has disappeared. Our costume designer, Alex Bovaird, looked extensively through magazines of the period. She dove into the archives. And certainly there are kind of films of the period. It was important to us to shoot on 35mm film, to sort of, even if only kind of subconsciously, create this sense of nostalgia, make this feel like a movie that could have been made circa 2002. But yeah, it was a huge part of the process, and I'm glad it resonated.
I was able to also get a bunch of like friends, older siblings yearbooks from 2004, which was really fun.
Thank you. I'm really pleased I saw this film today, because it is important to keep shining the light on things that need trying to be hidden. But Hugh Jackman really showed the dualism between, his belief in education, his continued, reading books, and his struggle with his belief that he was doing the right thing for himself, or whatever. But for me, it's weird. You're saying, it's a period piece, but in 2000 I was working for an American university in London with a London base, and I think what really caught my eye in the film was how, the need for education, the rising estate prices, and that dualism now is happening over here with, education isn't just education, it's the need to justify, you know, the expense involved and what it does for the larger community. I think this was an excellent film, and I just want to be able to say thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much. Do you, it's a question, a final question here? We've got one here and one here. Thanks. Thank you.
Hi, I'd like to ask about the student journalists. Was Rachel a real person or was she a composite character? And what happened to those kids who investigated and broke that story? Where are they now?
Yeah, so Rachel herself is a composite. It is true that the student newspaper, the Hilltop Beacon, broke the story before all other major journalists, and the actual students that broke the story wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, and I was fortunate enough to be able to speak with them, and as was our actress Geraldine. But I think that Rachel is also in part sees the sort of audience surrogate through which we can sort of see through a kind of relatable lens just like the sheer extent of the kind of corruption and sort of investigate along with her, which was sort of one of the great joys of writing the script, was sort of following her journey.
Hi, I really love how precise the whole film was from both the writing and the directing. And what I want to know is, from Cory, when it comes to directing, how do you balance getting the shot that's in your head that you want with both making sure you have enough coverage and making sure that you're letting the actors do their thing and actually get the performances natural to them?
It's a great question. Probably the biggest shift in the process for me, having gone from a first-time film to a second film this time, was having been through the editorial process. And I worked with an amazing editor named Louise Ford, who just was here yesterday. She also edited The Lighthouse, another movie that everyone should check out this fall. It was remarkable. Sort of going into my first movie, having come out of playwriting at the time, I was mostly working in theater prior to that. I had a real sense that you needed to kind of sort of capture each moment, each scene in the way that you need to sort of get a play. So there were a lot of oneers, sort of as a technical choice in that movie, but also just generally, it felt like if I wasn't seeing exactly what I needed in camera, I hadn't gotten the scene. And this time, I still tried to be very precise about the way that I would get scenes, but I was able to be a little bit more loose and a little bit more free about sort of being open to some of the improvisation from the actors, being open to getting possibilities, and sort of giving myself the pieces in the edit that I